Commercial diving is a scary job. So many things can kill you down there in the ocean's murky depths. But for 5 men, it was business as usual as they suited up to work to repair an oil pipe in Ponta Pierre in Trinidad and Tobago. But disaster struck. The unsealed pipe suddenly sucked these 5 terrified men deep into its 1,200-foot length. Imagine being stuck in a 30-inch tube filled with oily water, wounded and terrified, clinging to life, breathing in a narrow pocket of air. Between you and rescue are hundreds of meters of oily pipe and 55 feet of dark water. Your chances of survival are slowly ticking away. Only one man will survive. You might think this is just another tragedy, but it is far from it. 4 of those men could be alive and spending happy years with their families and friends if it wasn't for the PARIA company's decision to leave them there to die. Join me while we take a deep dive into the shocking deaths of these 4 brave men and the company that made the call to abandon them. On the 25th of February 2022, Faisal Kurban, Kazim Ali Jr., Rishi Nagazar, Youssef Henry, and Christopher Boudram readied for their day's work in Ponta Pierre. The PARIA company hired the private diving company LCMS to send these men to fix a sea line riser. This is a U-shaped pipe deep underwater that pumps oil to ships and tankers. It was a routine job. The 5 men met in a habitat, an 8 by 8 foot chamber where they could work while they remained dry some 18 meters under the water. They only had to take off a metal cover and remove 2 plugs in the pipe, join the 2 pieces together, and bolt them down. But what happened next would be far from routine and set these poor men on a road to tragedy. They removed the cover and the first plug. Suddenly, the second plug failed and the pressure difference sent water rushing back up into the dry chamber. It happened so quickly that no one had a chance to react as they were swallowed up by a great gush of seawater. Then gravity took its course, and they were sucked into the pipe in a tornado of swirling water, bodies and equipment down into the oily hell of a pipe. The terrified and battered men managed to find small pockets of air some 150 feet in the pipe where they found each other and communicated their injuries. There they agreed that Chris would venture down the pipe to seek rescue. They said prayers together, and Chris promised he would return to rescue his friends. Brave Chris forced his injured body down the length of the pipe, not sure that he was even in the right direction to freedom. He slowly made his way through the inky blackness until he found the vertical pipe up to the habitat chamber. Finally, he knew he was in the right tube that led to rescue. But no one was there waiting for him. No rescue team, no worried family. Only silence and the sound of his labored breathing. Too weak to pull himself up the pipe, he found a piece of chain and clung on for his life. He began screaming and crying for help until he was so weak he could only clang the chain against the sides of his prison. He was rescued some 3 hours later. The company had been alerted to the rush of water into the chamber and had presumed the divers dead. And suddenly, there was Chris. Not only was he alive, but he was explaining how his colleagues and close friends were alive and clinging to life deep inside the pipe. But what should have been a moment of joy soon turned dark, and the real tragedy of the PARIA diving incident began to unfold. The PARIA company did something completely unexpected and soul-destroying. They instructed the armed Coast Guard to prevent anyone from attempting to rescue the trapped men. Survivor Chris could hear his friends banging the pipes in hope and desperation as they lay in the hellish and oily dark, clinging to life through a small amount of filthy air. He begged the Coast Guard, anybody, to rescue his friends, one of whom was Faisal, his own cousin, but they would not listen. He even tried to go back down the pipe himself, but the armed Coast Guards prevented him and anyone else from entering the pipes. While the relatives wept and begged for news of their loved ones trapped in the pipe, PARIA staff busied themselves with writing out death notices. While the 4 men grew weaker each moment, losing their last hopes as the air thinned and their injuries worsened in the cold depths of the pipe. The families demanded answers and picketed the PARIA compound to no avail. Still, PARIA not only did not attempt to rescue the men, but also prevented LCMS from making their attempt to recover their staff. Not only that, some sources allege that PARIA ordered the rescuers to block the divers back in with the plug. PARIA believed that to effect a rescue would only endanger the rescuers, so company bosses did nothing. The men's final moments ticked away, and each one succumbed to suffocation and drowning in their oily pipe coffin. On Monday, February 28, 2022, PARIA released a statement that they had recovered 3 bodies of Faisal, Kazim, and Yusuf. They later recovered Rishi's body on March the 3rd. Autopsy results said the divers died between Sunday and Monday after almost 3 days of suffering, hoping for a rescue that just never came. The Commission of Inquiry created a 380-page report pointing a finger at PARIA for their role in the tragedy. They allege that PARIA not only failed in its duty of care for its divers, but the refusal to allow rescuers access to the area where the 4 divers lay trapped. The lengthy court case continues, with allegations ranging from negligence to manslaughter. The case has recently been remanded to September the 11th, 2024. Meanwhile, the loss and horror of the loved ones continue long after their loved fathers, brothers, and husbands lie under the earth. One can only hope that this slow grinding of justice will bring them some measure of closure, even though it will never bring back their cherished loved ones.